I identify myself first of all and foremost as a European. And let me explain why. Well, I'm not sure which was the first, the egg or the hen, but in any case, in this situation, probably because I consider myself mainly European. I've got a Lithuanian husband, although I am Polish. I live in Luxembourg. I used to live in Lithuania. I used to live in Brussels. So, you know, I'm a kind of a European nomad. And yeah, this probably is a part of my identity as well. So I'm absolutely oriented towards identifying myself, and also a sort of considering the context of my functioning, both professional and personal, probably as fully European, much less as Polish, if honestly. I was brought up as a very nationalistic Polish citizen, extremely Catholic. I was brought up in a small village in northeastern Poland. My parents, they have a little chapel in their garden. They have a little altar in their home. So we have lots of books of Henryk Sienkiewicz, Adam Mickiewicz, you know, and all that. So I was raised as a perfect nationalistic Polish, not that much oriented towards becoming European or cosmopolitan. However, being 13, when I found out that there are different, let's say, philosophical approaches towards where we come from and whom we might become, I think that I got much more open-minded. I quit being Catholic. I quit being Polish. And I think that was a decisive moment. I was then at the end of my primary school, and definitely the secondary school when I opened, let's say, intellectually. It was still in Łomża, so I would say it's a deep Polish province, but still I had great teachers who sort of opened me towards becoming a little bit more than just a typical Polish Catholic, full of complexes girl. And I'm totally grateful that they did it, actually. Then the studies, you probably know I studied interdisciplinary individual humanistic studies, the so-called MISH. So I could get acquainted with lots of different approaches towards, let's say, intellectual development. And I used any opportunity, at least almost every opportunity that I got to develop myself intellectually and spiritually and so on and so forth. Now I'm a perfect atheistic, non-Polish, cosmopolitic European. So. For me, probably it was this rise of populisms. But the question whether it was a moment or rather a process of growing or evolution, that's a different story. Probably it was this first moment when we felt, I mean, those Democrats and Europeans, or identifying themselves as Europeans, people thinking alike, when we understood that this, let's say, European integration and let's say, basically this internalization of European values in all the member states is not given once and forever, and it might be actually reversed. And that was quite striking. And I would say that what happened in Hungary, what happened in Poland, and then America actually brought a bit broader perspective of populism, because it has become worldwide, actually. Well, it became then. Now we know that with Joe Biden, maybe this process will be somehow, if not fully stopped, then at least broken. But in any case, I think that this rise of populism was maybe not a moment, but was the beginning of the process that has been more and more actually difficult for me to accept, and I can't see any prospect for a change towards what was there in 2004, where the hopes and you know, all these let's say expectations were so high, and they were present among so many different social groups. That's the problem also, that with populism, this division in the Polish society, but also divisions in European societies, it has become much more not only visible, but also probably also deeper. So from that point of view, I think that might have been the biggest concern for me. But of course, we might think about what was this problem. I don't know, maybe the crisis 2008, 2012, it was definitely a challenge for Europe. Then migration crisis, 2015. I mean, we know that since 2011, the process was to be expected, I mean, of this influx of immigrants. But at the same time, I think we failed as Europe, because we were supposed to, you know, using human rights paradigm, we should have accepted those people, we should have created conditions for them and so on. And we should have shown to the world as well that, yes, we are the zone of human rights, we are this better part of the world, and we failed. So yeah, member states, they particularly sort of used this situation. And honestly, maybe this was also this point in time when they used it for a raise of populisms, because that definitely contributed to that. And now, of course, the pandemic. There is a new, by the way, a new type of Euroscepticism, which is disappointment with too little power of the European Union and European institutions. And I think the pandemic has actually brought it to this, let's say, full light. So you see, the problem with Europe is that it doesn't have like clear ups. It might have had clear downs, but not clear ups, because Europe is, you know, it's a process. And it's actually a process of growing well-being that is already on quite a high level. So I would say that the best moment in the European Union, or for Europe, of course, actually I'm considering since 1989, because then we can speak about Europe, you know, not in a divided world, not after the Iron Curtain, let's say. So this is my beginning, let's say, of thinking about the European Union and the history of Europe, the modern history of Europe. So of course the enlargement would be something that was quite positive, although probably many Western Europeans now, they regret this decision, but of course I cannot agree with that. But in any case, this enlargement and all the enlargements, I would say, they have always given hope that the European Union is not a finished project, that it's, yes, maybe learning by doing, but at the same time, these are not such painful lessons. But since Europe is, you know, it's growing steadily and it's strengthening, let's say, people's sense of safety and security and solidarity and so on, it should at least. And it was definitely the case 2004, 2000, let's say 15 even, because when we think about the financial and economic crisis, Europe showed a really serious solidarity, even if we perceive it as, let's say, okay, German domination and, you know, pushing Greece and so on. Sure, we can have different opinions on that. But at the end of the day, we survived, and we probably became a bit stronger, at least. Then this migration crisis, maybe it was a little bit different in the sense that it hasn't faced everyone in the same, let's say, to the same scope. But still, it might have been probably a better, better organized and better managed. And now, same story probably now. Although I would say that on the basis of the pandemic crisis, again, the European Union will gain even more power. So again, the process of strengthening welfare and this resilience as well. Maybe resilience is a good word, because think about the USA. They have ups and downs, they do. Think about, I don't know, South America, think about Africa, think about even China. China is growing, of course, but we know what price they pay for it. And we realize that the Chinese very often, they look at Europe as, let's say, the best place in the world to live. Maybe Australia is like a little bit different, but they are almost like us. So from this point of view, I would say that, yeah, Europe is this nice piece of the world that is a sort of a good place to live. But whether it had its ups, yeah, maybe those moments of solidarity, of clear solidarity, but we know that they weren't like so vivid. They just contributed to further development, further integration, and hopefully further, let's say, strengthening of the European values, which now, let's say, is a little bit questionable, but hopefully we will survive and we will go through this crisis as well. You know, it fits perfectly, and I have to really underline it. It fits perfectly my lifestyle, because I'm a kind of a nomad. So the EU has Schengen. That's why I've been suffering during the pandemic for more than a year. It fits my lifestyle. So the EU has created an incredible, let's say, area which fits my lifestyle. The European Union has created conditions for me to develop. I've been a scientist for many years, so I also want to, let's say, spread this, results of my research and so on. And the EU also has brought me this opportunity. Yeah, as you know, this lifestyle, it's also having a Lithuanian husband and living in Luxembourg without, let's say, many limitations and much burden, with opportunity to travel without any limitations apart from financial ones, but this is also something that the EU does. I use the opportunity of traveling with Erasmus as a teacher, university teacher. I used to do it as a student as well. That's how I found my husband. And yeah, so there are different aspects. Plus, my parents, for example, they are entrepreneurs, and they use some funds from the EU. At the same time, they sometimes complain about, let's say, all those regulations that the EU, let's say, sets up. But at the same time, they understand it's for the sake of the consumers. So yeah, citizens again. So yeah, this is also something that protects us. You know, if you are in America and you want to be absolutely sure that you eat things that are safe and so on, you have to first try. And then if you suffer from whatever, you sue them basically in front of the courts. In the EU, the paradigm is different. There is a regulation and you have to follow it when you produce something in order to make it as safe for the consumers as possible. So we are much more, let's say, sure that we will get something that is safe, that is good, that will not do much harm to us. We do not appreciate it as the Europeans, because maybe we are not aware, maybe the member states just pretend to hide it from us, whatever, different probably reasons. But at the end of the day, this is also something I contribute from as a citizen aware of what the EU does to me. The European Union's values, they provide for a much better future for my son, simply, than, for example, those that now are present in Poland, let's say, under this government. So I have much less, let's say, sense of safety and sense of let's say, awareness that my son will have a bright and wonderful future in Poland than in the European Union as such, or in those states which share the European Union's values fully. love to have European Union's institutions stronger, and whether more democratic, you know, it's a tricky question, because I'm a political scientist, and I read a lot of classical authors, and there is Liebhardt, which you might know, of course, and he came up with 12 features of democracy that contribute to the overall evaluation of whether it's efficient or not. And he put these, let's say, benchmarks, whatever, to, for example, the majoritarian democracy and deliberative democracy, which is not a classical democracy, as we know. And this one is typical for the European Union. And this was better, more efficient in all those areas, in all those benchmarks, which means it has achieved all of them, which means that I'm a big fan. Okay. On the basis of that, I can say I'm a really big fan of a deliberative democracy. And this one is not always what citizens expect democracy to be. And this one is definitely not, let's say, a puppy for the member states. No, because if something, they consider it a little bit blur, you know, and something that they have very little influence on, or at least not as much influence as they would like to have. On the other hand, it also means that the European Union's institutions should be transparent, extremely honest, very well functioning, and absolutely no frauds, no, you know, corruption and this kind of stuff. We haven't faced it since Jacques Santer's actually European Commission, which means that, okay, maybe with some exceptions, which means that it's not so bad after all. But from this point of view, maybe the mechanism of the European Union should be a little bit more transparent, more efficient, from the point of view of who these people in the European Union's institutions are. But then how they work and how they operate, it should be based upon negotiation, deliberation, and so on. And I would love to have this more present to 2030, and the member states weaker, much weaker. I would also love to have European citizens stronger, because European Union citizens, according to Eurobarometer opinion polls, for 30 years already, they stronger and stronger believe in the EU. And each of the crises actually strengthened the European citizens' belief in the EU. And this is also the case now. So more and more Europeans, and definitely more than before the pandemic, Europeans want the EU to have more competences in the area of healthcare. So yeah, it means that probably we should somehow create this possibility, and hopefully the member states will understand it, possibility of, let's say, it shouldn't be changing the treaties, because we know that this is hard to achieve. It should be something within, let's say, interpretation of the treaties and obviously secondary law that should strengthen this area. And together with this area, maybe other areas would also accompany, let's say, the healthcare, like certain aspects of social care, and maybe the free movement of people, maybe, you know, other areas of maybe some aspects of traveling, maybe some aspects of migration. This all could be also strengthened on European level until 2030. And I would also personally love the EU to have a little bit more say regarding such things, let's say, as rule of law and common values, and of course, human rights. So I would love the EU to be a common area of human rights, where really those human rights in this understanding after the French Enlightenment, in this understanding, I would love to have them to be, let's say, the moral paradigm of the European Union, instead of any others, let's say, because, you know, research results, they show quite clearly that in those member states where any church is strong, there is more inequality, there is less welfare, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, the data doesn't lie usually, such a clear data set. But, okay, I mean, my point of view might not be that popular among, let's say, the leaders of the European Union's member states. it's not an easy question. You see, the problem is always that the EU, in order to do so, to convince anyone to anything, it absolutely needs the member states, because, you know, there is, there are channels of direct communication with the citizens from the EU institutions, but they are not very popular. And obviously the member states, they do anything they can to block these channels, or to use themselves as, let's say, mediator or intermediator. But speaking about more general aspects, yes, the EU might map the needs and the expectations of the Europeans in the whole EU, but using the self-governmental level. This is something that I miss a lot. More awareness of the EU of the meaning of self-government. So there is still too much effort to deal with governments and to satisfy the needs of the member states from the point of view of the governments, instead of direct cooperation with self-governments. And usually self-governments, of course, it's dependent on the structure of the state and territorial regime and so on. But basically, self-governments, the whole system of the EU, the nuts, yeah, which is also based upon self-governments to some extent, it could be a good system to directly address self-governments, because they are the closest to the citizens. And maybe this could give the EU opportunity to find out better who needs what, and then on the basis of this map, let's say, of the EU citizens' expectations, but measured on the basis of the self-governmental division, and self-governments could also provide the EU institutions with necessary information about what is really needed, what the Europeans expect. We have a few that we might point out, and they seem like the province of Poland. But honestly, if we think about people living there, they do not share the point of view of those who govern them. And that's incredible, because when you think about it, it means that those who govern, they rather want to be in line with, let's say, the party paradigms, in this case, Law and Justice, or they want to just fit the expectations they imagine that those who govern have, rather than really answer the people's needs and expectations. And the problem is that the EU shouldn't ignore it, because by ignoring it, the EU institutions will have absolutely no idea of what the Europeans really need. So from this micro perspective, there could be a great macro perspective, which means macro strategy of how to deal with the real expectations of the Europeans. Because the EU pays too much attention to convincing those who are already convinced, while they are ignoring those who are misinformed, sometimes on purpose by the member states, who do not know actually much about the EU. And the EU institutions, they really omit this wonderful transmitting belt, which would be self-government. So yeah, maybe that could be something I would expect from the EU in 2030, to be more aware of what people really want. But to get this, they should definitely deal more with self-government. I wish there were, let's say, much weaker member states and there was much stronger EU. Again, reply is not that easy. Well, you probably know the book, The Brussels Effect of Anu Bradford. She wrote about the influence of the European Union because of its regulatory, let's say, power. So yeah, all those data protection aspects and welfare strengthening and so on and so forth, this really is contagious in the world. So even the Chinese, they use the same patterns and they borrow them from us. in order to, let's say, put some order into their own activities. Same story with the USA and so on. So they see some pluses and some advantages in regulative powers. This is something that the EU exports, and this is something that we as Europeans do not appreciate enough, sufficiently, let's say, because it seems to be just in the air, you know. But at the end of the day, we should be aware of the fact that it's the EU that provides us with this protection that we sometimes don't see, but it's there. And we wouldn't have it in the USA or in China or maybe not even in Australia. So the EU, speaking about this international, let's say, context, is a place where, yes, we have certain regulations, but at the same time, the citizen is always in the center of any kind of scope, any kind of perspective, any kind of activity, and so on and so forth. I very often tell my students that the EU is specific among international organizations, but also generally speaking, because yes, the member states are meaningful as, let's say, one of the levels, but at the same time, it's always the citizens that count the most. Because if we speak about data protection, about development, and so on and so forth, at the end of the day, it's always about a citizen. And why? Because of those human rights. It's not about certain community. I don't know, it's not about Catholic Church. It's not about community of whatever people thinking alike. It's not about entrepreneurs. It's not about, it's always about the citizen. So this is something specific. Whether in Australia they have it exactly to the same extent, probably not entirely. So we are still better from that point of view. But if we think about all those sometimes funny stories, like, you know, the bananas being you know, regulated and so on, we all know it's not about bananas. We all know it's about citizens and about protecting their businesses, and it's about strengthening their well-being. It's about strengthening, I don't know what, not the member states. Of course, member states, they try to fight for any kind of I don't know, influence on the European, let's say, government, or they want to get richer. Well, Germany, they really operate to a large extent just to protect their businesses. But that's what the EU doesn't actually do. The EU doesn't protect EU businesses, because in the EU we have businesses from China, we have businesses from the USA, we have European businesses. It's there to protect the citizen. And then, of course, citizens are also entrepreneurs. Citizens are also employees of Google and Microsoft, sure. So therefore, the system has to operate in order to, let's say, serve any kind of citizens. But this is something specific, because, you know, you usually don't have this opportunity to protect the citizen, whoever he or she is, or a citizen that is transgender. And in the European Union, it's about anyone, whatever identity they have. And this is something specific, because in other countries, in Russia and China, in the USA, you have lots of exclusions. They are exclusive, let's say, types of societies. While the EU is absolutely inclusive, and even if the member states, they try to regulate it in a different way, the EU at least tries to take efforts to change it, because we know that there are no competencies in this area, so, or they are limited. So of course the EU has sometimes to, let's say, creatively use the primary law, I don't know, Charter of Fundamental Rights and so on, to, let's say, provide the citizens with their full rights, whether they are transgender or gays or lesbians or, I don't know, women or children and so on and so forth, because otherwise they would be vulnerable if their governments don't protect them, let's say, didn't protect them properly. So yeah, that's the specificity of the EU that I would point out as something incredibly meaningful and something unique worldwide. Plus this regulative power, which is, as I said, it's important, but at the end of the day, it's all about the citizen again.